Welcome to this breakdown, where we're going to dive straight into the crucial regulations governing exactly how new ingredients safely make their way into our food supply. Look, if you're a professional working anywhere near the food, beverage, or packaging industries, understanding compliance isn't just a nice-to-have, it's absolutely mandatory. So today we're taking those incredibly complex regulatory frameworks and translating them into plain, actionable concepts. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what the rules actually require.
We've got a really clear roadmap for our analysis today. We're going to cover why food safety matters, how we define a food additive, the GRAS exception, the notification process, and finally, the consequences of noncompliance.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Have you ever wondered how a brand new ingredient legally makes it to your dinner plate? Because you definitely can't just invent a new preservative in a lab and casually start selling it to grocery stores. There is a massive, totally invisible system of checks and balances working behind the scenes to make sure that what we consume won't harm us.
Starting with Section 1, Why Food Safety Matters. This is the foundational principle of consumer protection.
The government demands a really strict standard before they'll approve anything. Now, regulators don't actually expect absolute 100% certainty. Why? Because the scientific community generally agrees that proving absolute harmlessness is, well, practically impossible. Instead, scientists have to be reasonably certain that a substance poses no danger when it's used exactly as intended. That concept of reasonable certainty is literally the bedrock of all food compliance. And the math behind that safety standard is actually fascinating. Regulators typically require a safety margin of 100 to 1. What does that mean? Well, if lab tests show an animal can safely consume a certain maximum amount of ingredient with zero harmful effects, humans are legally only permitted to consume 1/100th of that amount in their daily diet. It is a massive buffer, totally designed to account for differences between species and to protect our most vulnerable populations.
Moving on to Section 2. Defining a food additive. Let's understand what actually falls under the law.
The legal definition here is probably a lot broader than you might think. It doesn't just apply to the obvious stuff, like artificial food coloring or flavor enhancers. It covers literally anything that becomes a component of the food or changes its characteristics. So the law aggressively covers both the ingredients you intentionally eat and the materials that simply touch the food and might accidentally transfer over.
It's kind of like this. Think of a direct additive as a baked-in ingredient, your preservatives, texturizers, nutritional supplements. On the flip side, a food contact substance is like a guest at a party who doesn't actually eat the food, but still has to pass a super strict security clearance at the door just to be in the room. We're talking about plastic packaging, the glues used on your cereal boxes, or even the lubricants on factory conveyor belts. If it touches the food, for sure, it's regulated.
That brings us to Section 3, the GRAS exception explained. Let's look at how you might skip the standard approval line.
See, not every single ingredient has to go through a massive, completely new approval process. There's a hugely important exception built into the law. If an ingredient is generally recognized as safe, commonly known in the industry as GRAS, it means the scientific community already widely agrees that it poses no threat. Because there's already a strong consensus, these substances can legally bypass the heavy, drawn-out pre-market approval process that brand new chemicals face.
The whole point here is the difference in your regulatory burden as a business. A standard new additive requires you to prove safety completely from scratch, generating tons of your own proprietary lab data. A GRS substance, however, leans heavily on an existing, rock-solid scientific track record that's already out there and available to the public.
But you can't just slap a GRAS label on your product in secret and call it a day. To actually qualify, you need documented, widely published scientific evidence that experts already agree on. Or, alternatively, you can prove GRAS status if you've got robust documentation showing that a significant number of consumers were safely eating the substance prior to 1958. So yeah, it requires a real, verifiable history.
All right, Section 4, the notification process. Let's talk about actually getting that regulatory green light. If you're a business bringing a new packaging material to market, like a newly engineered plastic wrapper, you enter the food contact notification workflow. You submit a highly detailed dossier of chemical migration data to regulators, and then you wait. It's a mandatory 120 days. The rule here is basically silence is golden. If the agency evaluates your data and stays quiet for those 120 days, your notification becomes effective and you are legally cleared for business. On the other hand, if you're officially filing a GRAS notice to the government, the process is uniquely structured. You actually have to compile a rigorous 7-part narrative detailing everything from your manufacturing methods to dietary exposure estimates. Once you hit submit, regulators give themselves up to 180 days to review your science and get back to you with a response.
So looking at these submission types and required review periods, you can see how this absolutely has to factor into your business strategy. Compliance isn't something you can just handle the week before a big launch. You've got to build significant wait times. We're talking 4 to 6 months at a minimum into your product development schedule, purely for the regulatory review phase alone.
Which leaves us with our final section, Section 5, Consequences of Non-Compliance. Let's look at what happens when things go wrong.
The penalties for trying to bypass this system are, quite frankly, severe. If you fail to prove safety, or if you just decide to skip the notification process altogether, your product can be legally classified as adulterated. That is a massive red flag in food law. It means your product is legally unfit for commerce and is going to face a complete withdrawal from the market.
Furthermore, just clearing the checkpoint once doesn't mean you're cleared forever. Authorization is not permanent. If new toxicological science emerges that suggests a risk, the agency can swiftly intervene. They'll demand answers, giving you a strict 30-day deadline to provide counter-evidence. If your data is insufficient by day 60, they will absolutely revoke your market access.
Ultimately, the burden of proving ongoing safety always rests directly on the manufacturer and the supplier. Regulators hold the continuous authority to pull the plug at literally any time. It's a highly dynamic, ongoing relationship, strictly designed to ensure our food system remains fiercely guarded against evolving chemical threats and new scientific discoveries.
So think about this. Those invisible legal frameworks, the 100-to-1 safety ratios, the detailed GRAS narratives, and the stringent 120-day reviews, they are working behind the scenes every single day. They exist entirely to ensure that every single bite you take and every single package you open is reasonably certain to be safe. It really makes you look at a simple snack wrapper in a whole new light, doesn't it?
If you found this helpful or want to stay updated when this regulation changes, subscribe and support the channel. And if you need the full technical details on this CFR, click the link in the description below. See you next time.